Okay, before I get into quick thoughts for the podcast today, as the title suggests, this is about separating art from the artist. I just want to make a quick note. This is something that I did talk about on my main YouTube channel and the podcast back in March. So that conversation is there. I think I talked for about a half an hour about this very topic, very specifically, and I did not go back and listen to that or watch that again because I know that I'm going to end up having some of the same points. However, this was just a question that someone asked me to talk about on the Instagram page. So when I was asking, when I threw it out there on my story, as I do every week now, like, hey, do you have any questions for Artist Life podcast? And someone mentioned this. I thought, hey, this is a different podcast than my personal one that just gets the audio from my YouTube channel just kind of adapted into a podcast format, which is Artist Personal Journalist. This is different. There's people that follow this that don't follow the other thing, and I could talk about it here. Also, since March, it's better part of a year. In 10 months, maybe my thoughts and opinions have changed a bit, and I'll end up having a different discussion and revisiting a little bit. Will not be a bad thing. And actually, when I just sat down here not too long ago in the studio and started thinking about it, I was like, I think I kind of do have some different thoughts than I did before. Again, I didn't want to check because I didn't want to taint how I felt right now based off of watching that other video or listening to the podcast episode specifically, the whole thing, going in detail, and then being like, oh yeah, I guess I'll just repeat all that stuff again. I know some of the points I would have made them, but not all of them. For a half hour, I don't remember everything that I said specifically. Anyway, that was just a little note before I get started. So, my quick thought today was just reflecting on what happened last week when I talked about how my artist practice has changed in the past decade. And I kind of went beyond the past decade, talked about my artist practice a bit. And one thing that I want to pick on specifically that I was just thinking about today was that I didn't really define certain things as part of my art practice back then that I do now. I really want to stress that I feel like reading, research, reflecting, writing is very much part of my art practice, and I've come to only really understand that in the past maybe 2 years. That wasn't something I really thought of as my art practice before. I only thought of the creation part. The creating of the visual art pieces was part of my art practice before that was it. I didn't really think about this other stuff. And that's why, the first thing that I wanted to get when I got this studio space was this love seat that's over there, was because I knew I'm not coming in here just to sit in an uncomfortable chair and just work. That's not it. Yes, I wanted a love seat there just so I could relax sometimes, because I can't just come in here, work, and leave. I knew that I needed to be in the space, have this atmosphere, enjoy the space, be able to read. But even then, I didn't realize that reading, writing, that type of reflection on myself was part of my artistic practice, and it very much is. It should have been something that had been obvious to me from day one, or at least been something that I picked up when I was doing my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. But I just didn't really come to appreciate it, understand it, and really think of it as artistic practice for me. That is part of it. It is the research. Sometimes I guess a lot of the inspiration for my pieces just comes from my life and my interactions with other people, my interactions with other art forms, whether it be movies or music or poetry or whatever, that inspire me to create something visual sometimes from it. Also, again, it's just interactions with anything and everything. And I just express that after something happens within me, and there's a process, and then I start feeling things, and then I express that. But that's just, it's not something that I was doing very conscious research on. I wasn't spending my time, and I think I talked about it last time, research. If I start to go into historical stuff, art history, sometimes can seem very boring, or history of anything seems boring to me. I just want to do the thing. I just want to make the thing. But there's so much that goes into that sometimes. And I don't mean researching on a specific piece, because some people spend hours and hours and hours because the concept that they're trying to express has so many things. It's so rich in either metaphor, or they just need to research what colors are native to this area that they're trying to represent, and the plant life. There's so many things that you could do where research is incredibly important. For me, usually it isn't, because I'm just somehow talking about me, how I've filtered in certain culture or how I just filter in my experiences, and then I just vomit it out, and that's it. However, like, yeah, the informal research, even on myself, is something that is what I do when I write. I give myself a chance to really process these things in a different way. That whole external processing, that being an external processor, like, that's another thing I've only come to really realize about myself in the past year, and that's very important. So sometimes it happens in layers that I don't even understand all the steps, or I didn't really think about them for a long time, and I just thought, oh, I'm just painting now, I'm just acting, and that's the artistic process, or that's the artistic practice. It's just like, yeah, this is, I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out. But that's what I would stress, and just kind of reflecting on last week's thing with some quick thoughts. Moving on from that, separating art from the artist. Whew, this is a tough one because I feel like I don't remember what sparked that conversation in me last March. I know it probably had a lot to do with the Me Too movement. Saying that it's a movement is just weird, but I mean, that's what it's called, and what most people will recognize it by. So there's been a lot of, at the time especially, a lot of celebrities, actors, comedians, recognizable names and faces that people have grown to love their work over time, that they had been, and musicians as well, artists in different rights, but not really a lot of visual artists or authors or things like that for the most part, that just, people enjoyed their work and thus enjoyed them. I guess that's something we'll get to, and that separation or non-separating those things, the work and the person. And then something would happen, something would come out in the news, and then, oh no, we can't like Kevin Spacey anymore, Kevin Spacey's canceled. I did another video after that about cancel culture being canceled. You can look for that on my FK Arts YouTube channel, or again in the Artist Personal Journalist podcast. But I knew that would have been the context where I brought it up, and I'm pretty sure. I brought on some musical examples because that was a thing too, and less popular, but something that happened in my world was Tim Lambesis from As I Lay Dying, a metal band. There was this whole thing of how he attempted to hire a hitman to kill his wife, and there was this whole thing because something with the kids, and obviously some marital issues going on there in their personal relationships, and then now he's back in the band now, and at first his bandmates were saying like no, like we don't want anything to do with this guy, and for years he was off doing something else and serving his sentence and other things, and then so many people are talking about how like they're gonna go throw all their As I Lay Dying records in a fire now and all this stuff. So that was kind of happening around that time too. That might have been on my mind. And I guess I know that I was very aggressive in my approach in saying like, no, you have to separate the art from the artist. Like, that is what people who are critical thinkers do. And that's why I felt like, you know what, I can get something out of this again, because I feel like that's my immediate reaction, and that's what I remember saying. And again, memory is a tricky thing, and I didn't go back and watch or listen to that episode again for a reason, but in my mind I felt like that's really what I was saying, and what I remember saying about like, it's if you're a critical thinker, you're going to be able to think about the piece, about the artist, about whatever, and separate those things, and still be able to enjoy the art for what it is, rather than just attaching it to the artist and all of a sudden it's negative. And I still believe that, but I also believe that even more so, you should just you give yourself an opportunity to maybe find out more about the artist and see if that lends context to the work they put out. I think this is more important with visual art than the other stuff I was talking about. Like I said, the Me Too movement and all this stuff is kind of what brought it to the fore. When I was talking about it last year, I started talking about Michael Jackson, I was talking about Louis C.K., I brought up Kevin Spacey, I brought up Tim Lambesis, there's others as well. But if I go back to that Michael Jackson example for a minute, I really feel like the music that he put out, here's the other thing, I guess, I have to say, to some degree, while he was alive, he was not proven in a court of law to have done anything that he was alleged to do, that he was accused of, etc. Not saying that I believe he did or didn't do it, that's neither here nor there for this argument. Nothing was proved, and even if something was proved, people can obviously deny that and just go with whatever, and they don't have to necessarily believe it for whatever reason. I probably brought up Bill Cosby too, and I'm not a Bill Cosby fan at all whatsoever, and never really have been, and have no personal attachment to that thing. To him, I guess, and his output as a comedian or actor or what have you. Anyway, when I look at Michael Jackson's content, Michael Jackson is the first musical artist that I enjoyed as a child and still enjoy his music today. The content of the songs on a song-by-song basis, these are overwhelmingly beautiful, positive, uplifting, optimistic messages. And the other ones that maybe express frustration at things like Tabloid Junkie or Why You Want to Trip on Me or whatever, I don't see as negative things. And I listen to a lot of what are, in air quotes here, say negative music or whatever. I'm listening to a lot of heavy music, depressing music, really aggressive music expressing anger. I don't see those things as negative anyway, because I believe the expression in itself lends the creator, some form of relief, and maybe it's therapeutic, using art as a cathartic process for me to even listen to. All that stuff makes sense to me. But anyway, I don't think that we can go back and say, oh, these things that Michael Jackson was alleged to have done, oh, now the music makes sense. Now we're given a context for the music. I really don't think we are. I don't think that stuff lends context. I think when we talk about the abuse he suffered as a child, we can see how maybe some of that personal history of his translates into him as a person and the art that he creates, he created, the music that he created. So in certain songs like Ben, when he was still a child and talking about his love for this rat and basically this outcast that people would abuse and whatever, there's context there in his personal life that would lend to further understanding his music and his art. And I just don't believe, from what I can tell, and again from being a Michael Jackson fan for a long time, obviously that could bias me, but I'm trying to be a critical thinker and try to look at this separately without that bias and just look at it for what it is. That these allegations of sexual abuse, child abuse, whatever you want to call it, I can't look at that and then look at I can look at that and then I can look at the music and the songs, and they don't compute. Not saying that he didn't do any of that stuff, because I am not him. I don't know what happened. I don't see any physical proof or evidence. Not saying that we just ignore people when they say things happened. I'm just saying that I have no 100% personal belief or faith in him doing something or not doing them. It's just neither here nor there. But that stuff doesn't give me context for his art. So let's just say, play the game, if he had done these really horrible things, and that's the other thing, is that everyone's done horrible things. Everyone has things they're ashamed of. We've talked a lot about access to information and about how technology and the internet and everything else has really changed our culture, and talking about art and all these good and bad things. And I think that this is one of those examples too of yes, everyone has dirt. Everyone has done things they're not proud of. Everyone has done things they're embarrassed of. Not necessarily that things are illegal. I'm not saying that they go to the extreme of sexual predatory behavior or abuse or any of those things. But this goes to another conversation about killing your heroes and stuff like that, which I won't get into right now, because we're talking about art and separating art from the artist. And I'm going to get to some visual art examples as well. But I just really feel like with the Michael Jackson thing, that even if he had done those things and it was proven that he did those things, and I even believe that he did those things that he was accused of, I would still enjoy the music. Because there's nothing like that part of him gives context to that, oh wow, now I see what the song is about. It's not really about, whatever that song happened to be about. It's really this hidden thing. No, I just don't see that. I don't connect the dots there. So I really feel, I would still feel good about listening to that music. I'm pretty sure, because I don't condone what Tim Lambesis has done, where, hiring a hitman to kill your wife because of whatever struggles you're having with, wanting to separate, and then, someone wanting to keep the children, and someone, whatever the issues were. I don't condone just like hiring someone to kill them as a solution. Yet I can listen to the lyrics and the music of As I Lay Dying, and I can say, yeah, like I don't, again, those things don't compute. I don't hear any, that doesn't give me any context for, okay, well now, you know, when I listen to certain songs, they're no longer uplifting or positive. They no longer make me want to better myself because he made this huge mistake and is a horrible person, or like, or just a flawed person, which we all are, whatever. It doesn't, again, that's where that critical thinking comes in, where it's like, I can enjoy this as a separate thing. The art in itself can be separate from the artist, and I'm going to get into more reasons why too. That's an example where I'm like, it just doesn't, I don't know, watching a Kevin Spacey movie, for example. The movie, you know, well, not a Kevin Spacey movie, but a movie with Kevin Spacey in it, I don't look at his character in the movie, because I mean, that's what it is, it's a character, and we'll get back to that again too. I don't look at his character in the movie and think, man, I just can't even look at this guy. Like, look, like these things that he's accused of, these things that he said he did, the things that he admitted to, I just can't even enjoy this anymore. Part of it is just maybe that I'm wired differently. And I acknowledge that too. That some people are just wired a certain way, and maybe they just can't separate the things, but I really feel like it's advantageous to be able to separate those things. That you can enjoy things in the world for what they are. That movie is a piece of art, and it's a collaborative piece, so it's not the same as like making a piece of visual art or writing or something, because there's so many other people in the movie, there's so many things that went into it, thousands of people helped do this, that, with the styling and the direction and the writing and the screenplays and all this stuff. But the thing is that like it just doesn't ruin it for me to have someone that maybe I don't respect anymore, or that I never respected or whatever, but I can look at the movie and I can be like, yeah, that was really good. Like, I really enjoyed that. Or I enjoyed their performance. I enjoyed their character. I'm happy at what I got out of it. I did get something out of it, and it wasn't this negative thing because that person's nasty in my brain. I feel like I had another example, and now I let it slip again. But if we're talking about visual art, so some people talk about Picasso, and we're like, why should we be celebrating these amazing pieces by Picasso? And there's a bunch of different reasons why people say that. They talk about patriarchy, and there's other people who were doing things that were similar, or there was women that could be celebrated, and we don't want to put this misogynistic, abusive man on a pedestal and look at their work. I'm not a huge Picasso fan, by the way. It's not. I understand there's some significance there, and whoever at the time decided, I'm going to write about his work, and we're going to photograph his work, and we're going to whatever. People made him important just by exposure, right? So it's not that the work inherently by itself is necessarily incredibly groundbreaking and important, and other people might have been doing things that were similar. They didn't have the exposure. They weren't made to be important. They weren't made to be the poster boy or whatever for certain movements. And maybe he did do some amazing groundbreaking work, and I'm not trying to take that away from him either. So people just talk about, like, can you separate the art from the artist? So when we get into visual art, like I said, this is an example where I feel like it is way more personal, way more of just one person, usually not collaborating with anyone, expressing themselves in an insular way that it's just them, the individual, and the canvas, or whatever could be the canvas in the scenario. I feel like, just like a musician, or a comedian, or whoever, that there is context for maybe what they would do in their personal history, and there's some stuff that just doesn't matter. So can we say how Picasso treated his wife, or his son, or whatever, or whoever he was abusive to in any way, that taints this piece of work over here? That this piece now means something different? Yes and no. I think that, and I don't have any specific examples of specific pieces that I'm thinking of right now, but I think that sometimes that personal history of somebody and getting more context for who they are and what they're about and what they went through and what they did when they weren't making art, sometimes that lends itself to like, it's like if you found out that they were part of a certain religion. And you're like, oh, this helps me understand this piece better. Now I understand their ideology, and maybe that makes me believe that I understand the piece better. That's a better way to say it. That, like, I believe I understand things better because I have more context, even though maybe he didn't say these certain words, that this is a fact about him, and now I'm adding that into what I know about him, and maybe the symbolism in this piece changes for me now, and the meaning changes because I understand this one thing. Maybe. Again, maybe. Unless that artist specifically talks about all the details in their work and stuff, and even then, there's things that maybe they didn't bring up for a reason, and then you find something out about them, and then you attach that to the work. But the other thing that's great about art, and visual art specifically, is that you come to the piece with your own personal history and you interpret it the way you want. If there's an artist statement, or if there's a bunch of research and written stuff or interviews and you've already seen all that and you just want to see the work in that context, you can do that too. But you can also come to the work with your, no matter what, you don't have a choice, with your personal histories and experiences, and you interpret that work differently than anyone else can. No one else can interpret it the same way. Even if you read all the papers that were written and watched all the interviews and did whatever else, and you can even say, oh wow, the artists themselves, they talked about this piece and said this thing about it and that thing about it, so that's what it's about. You still come to it and have your own interpretation slightly that is just yours individually and no one else's. And if there's nothing written about them, and there's no context you have, you can just appreciate the work for just that piece of work and nothing else. And I really feel that that's a useful skill to have. Sometimes it's a desire to want to know more about the work and be like, what did they intend? I'm so curious. What is it that they wanted to tell me? Because sometimes artists are trying to tell you something specific and sometimes they're not. If I think about my own abstract work, I'm not trying to tell anyone anything specific. In any of my abstract work, I am simply expressing myself, and a lot of other people find something in that and they react to it and they can appreciate it on some level, or even if they can't appreciate it in a positive sense, they can react to it, maybe even just on an aesthetic level, but either way somebody can be moved and react to it, and that's just a bonus for me, but I'm making it for me, I'm expressing myself. However, other times when I've done some more work with the body and talked about consent in one body of work that I exhibited, I did want to express certain things, and it was still a little muddy, but I wanted to express, hey, you're coming to this with your own personal histories and experiences, and the way you think about it isn't necessarily the way someone else is going to think about it. In that body of work, there were female bodies represented in a way that were, tied to chairs, that they were duct taped and bound, but there was no context for it. The titles didn't really give a context for it, even though there were titles, such as, in parentheses, just the word soft. I mean, that gives a little bit of something to play with, playing with that title, and you could take it literally or the exact opposite and say, oh, this is just like irony or whatever. But there's purposely no one else in these images. It was just the women by themselves. And some people immediately thought these were aggressive acts where the individual didn't want to be in that scenario, and other people, maybe for whatever reason, saw it as like, oh, maybe this is something that they relate to or that they partake of in their own home willingly with a trusted partner. So that was something interesting then. But anyway, I had a very specific agenda, and I wasn't necessarily telling people what to think, but it also, I'm saying this because I got really upset. I had someone call me a misogynist. They left me a note on the artist statement, and I was like, you clearly didn't read the artist statement, because the artist statement outlines how things are vague for a reason, blah, 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 blah. People come to this and then they create their own conclusions, and you're just making an assumption and then just calling me that, which I didn't appreciate. I learned to let go of that and just appreciate the fact that it related to the work, etc. However, I'm sure that person walked away attaching the art and to the artist, because their interpretation of the art was that it was misogynistic. Therefore, the artist must be a misogynist. And that's where things get into trouble sometimes. Because in that scenario, I mean, I wouldn't identify as a misogynist, because I just don't believe I am. Either way, that's not even what the art was trying to represent. And maybe just because I wasn't trying to represent it, doesn't mean that that's not what I was representing, I guess, because if I am, let's just say I am a misogynist, and I don't even realize it, or I just don't define myself or label myself that way, but that's really how I am because that's how I treat women or whatever, and then subconsciously that has worked its way into my artwork, and someone interpreted that more correctly than I even knew and attached the label to me. This can go off in so many different directions and go completely off the rails. the thing is that none of that was proven. And even when it is something that could be proven, in the case of, Kevin Spacey or Tim Lambesis or what have you, that I think it's valuable to do that critical thinking and realize that, okay, let's look at this stuff that is proven, and does that matter? Does it matter for me to enjoy this piece? If I enjoyed it before, why can't I enjoy it now? Because the creator, it's such a case-to-case basis, and that's what I'm realizing now more than I was when I made the video originally in March. Because if I looked at a piece, like an abstract piece, let's say, and it was just gorgeous and looked, to me, if it was just like black and bloody with crimson and whatever, and then later someone told me, oh yeah, like, let's just say that the title, let's just say it was untitled. I had no idea, there was no artist statement, there was nothing for context. And then someone tells me, or I research, or the artist themselves says to me, yeah, I cut off babies' heads and poured all the blood on here. I was like, oh, this piece means something different to me now. And you, as a person who did that, I don't like that. I also don't like this piece because of how it was made. So then the context, separating the art from the artist, like that's something else. However, if there's another piece right next to it where they didn't use a bunch of decapitated baby blood to make, and it was just like, yeah, I just used acrylic paints and spray paint for this one, and it's gorgeous and beautiful, well, I still like it. The thing is that I still would like the aesthetics of the black and crimson piece, but I would be thinking of it much differently. I'm like, oh, that doesn't mean what I was attaching to it at first. I came to it with a feeling, and now when I look at it, I like the aesthetics of it. I don't like how it makes me feel anymore. And that's one step that I think could be taken. Again, but it doesn't change the other piece right next to it, because what that artist did in one piece doesn't affect to me what they did on the other piece. Therefore, the artist themselves and how they act as an individual and as a person, it doesn't affect their artwork in every single case. It's not a blanket statement. It's not an umbrella. Like, them as a person is not an umbrella for all their work. They obviously made the work, but you put out the work in itself is, let's just call it a product. Let's just, it is a piece or whatever. The product in itself can still be consumed and still be enjoyable without that person being a good person. I don't believe in financially supporting people who are known to be huge pieces of trash. I don't want to support bigots and other, things, whether they be sexist or racist or super abusive people. Like, no, I don't want my finances to support that person. But if I already had, let's just say it's a CD. Like, let's say, okay, the band All That Remains, which again, maybe some of you don't know or whatever, but Phil, and for some reason I can't remember his last name right now, the vocalist, I bought 2 of the albums back in the day. I really enjoyed the music. Eventually I stopped kind of enjoying the music as much. Also around the time that he started going off on using what I'm going to call the F word and being very homophobic and just being a bigot and being, I'm a libertarian and all, whatever. And his definition of that I think is way off. Whatever. There was just a lot of things. I'm like, you know what? I really don't want to financially support this band anymore. I wasn't anyway for a couple of years because the albums just weren't good enough for me to. But I made a very conscious choice that even if they came out with a killer album, I wasn't going to buy it. That would be a case where I don't know how I would obtain it if I really wanted to listen to the music, because the music in itself and the messages I found in those other albums wasn't tainted by his current behavior. Even if his current behavior and the current album, if the current album had the lyrics and content and whatever else that I was able to find positivity in, and it didn't seem like his current behavior or my knowledge, I guess, of his politics and feelings towards people, if that wasn't represented on the album, then the album is a separate thing. So, and this is what I want to get to in conclusion, that I really feel that if I bring this back to actors, that they are always representing a character. Even comedians, some are very forward and open and talking about Bill Burr is not Bill Burr, okay? Bill Burr at home is not the Bill Burr you hear on his podcast, and it's not the Bill Burr you see when he's doing stand-up. That Bill Burr is a character. That everything we do, when we create a certain thing becomes a persona, then it becomes a character. Obviously, for an actor or an actress, that we're all aware that, oh yeah, this person on the screen is a character, and we don't attach the character to the person. Like, I know that Michael Richards is not Kramer. Like, I realize that he is a person and that he doesn't act like Kramer at home, and that's a separate being. It's a fictional character. You know what I mean? So even when it comes to, it's like writing. Like, if you're writing something, the views you're expressing aren't necessarily your views. You're exploring a topic. You're maybe holding a mirror up to society, whatever else. Same thing with creating artwork. So some people specifically express societal ills, make social commentary, things like that, and they don't even do what I would call personal work. I mean, it's personal in a way because it's their personal ideas, but they're not making something that is just about themselves. They're providing social commentary very specifically and consciously on purpose to say, hey, look at this, I want you to think about this. Not even giving you the answers necessarily, but saying, I want you to think about this. Whereas if I'm making my personal work, it's just because I need to make it, and then I put it out there for viewing and for selling and whatever else. But it is just my personal work that I need to make that's all about me and my emotions and how I feel about the things I take in day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, etc. Okay, so the thing is that those pieces are a representation of what I was feeling in that moment. But me as an artist is a character, because my art is only one part of who I am. It is a huge part of who I am, I would say. And I would say in some ways, and I mentioned this last time, I really feel like I just am an artist all the time. Like, it's not like I just put my artist hat on when I get to the studio. How I interpret my experiences or how I live my experiences or whatever else is part of the art to me. It ends up being part of my artistic practice, and my artistic process is from just living and then interpreting the living that I've done and expressing it outwardly into a piece of art, whether it's writing, whether it's music, or visual art, which is mostly the case for me. But someone says, oh, Jonathan the artist, like, that is not the whole person. Right? That is just a character of me. Jonathan the teacher is just a character, because no one is around you 100% of the time, right? So that is still just a character of you. It is just a part of you, and that's what that is. So you should be separating that from everything else in a certain way, I feel, and it's going to be really hard to unpack that. But I just feel like we're getting into some like really deeper stuff here than I was thinking, but it is not representative of me as a whole person. When I paint a piece, I keep looking over there because there's a piece that I just finished the other day. That was how I felt in that one moment. That moment was a part of me. And it still might be with me. And maybe in a couple weeks it won't be with me anymore. But that's a representation of a moment. That piece is just that piece. Like, it was representative of something I thought or I felt or whatever. I've had some crazy thoughts. And they didn't always make it to the canvas or whatever because there's no reason to represent them or express them. Like, there's things that enter your mind sometimes you just don't even know, like, why did I even think that? Where did that come from? That's messed up. That doesn't define you as a person. And again, we shouldn't even be talking about that. Whatever defines you as a person doesn't necessarily define your art. I'm going to go back to this thing and see, like, they're very separate, or they can be very separate. Sometimes what defines you as a person really is just, your art comes from you, and that makes sense, and we need to know more about, the more we did know about the artist, it really informed the work, but sometimes it just doesn't matter. And that's why, again, being a critical thinker is so important. You get to decide when it matters and when it doesn't matter, and I understand that. But the problem is when people exercise their right to be like, oh yeah, that person is crap, so all their art meant that they're crap. Or like, we shouldn't celebrate that art because that person is a misogynist or because they were abusive. So we shouldn't celebrate that. Now, I mentioned that I don't want to support people financially sometimes, and I guess by celebrating a certain artist, I mean, if they're still alive or what have you, by exhibiting the work, by showing it, whatever, it could be giving them some financial gain. But if the work by itself is important, and provides discussion and moves things forward in whatever context, maybe that's still worth having, and we just have to ignore the fact that that person gets paid by being crappy, but their artwork in that one context is not crappy. It's not representative of their crappy ideals, or it's a mess. Basically, we arrived at the fact that it's just a mess. But I really do believe that it's something that people need to be thinking about on a case-to-case basis, and I really find that so many people are closed off and they can't separate the art from the artist. That blows my mind. I feel like people miss out on so many things. They could be enjoying so many things that you know, just shutting yourself down to thinking about or interpreting a work, or I don't want to watch that movie anymore, or listen to that band, or, you know, it's just, I don't know. I just feel like I don't even want to call it a skill. I think it's something you can exercise. It's something it's innate in me. I don't know why, but it is, and I'm glad that it is, because, I mean, I exercise it, I guess, in a way I continue to feel that way. I continue to think about it critically now, but I mean, at some point I just realized, oh, this is just what I do, and I like that I do it, so I continue doing it, which is, again, being able to compartmentalize things, being able to separate art from the artist. I still get to enjoy that art for what it is, how it was made in that moment, what I believe it is saying to me, and not what, you know, that person just didn't taint everything that they've ever made because of their actions at some point in their life or another. Whew. That's, yeah, I don't know where else to go with that. Yeah, I feel like I had a way to wrap that up even more, and I lost it. I just feel like there's value in being able to separate, and looking at, you know, yourself sometimes as a character. Man, I really had a point that I was going to get to, and I don't recall what it was. I think that we do ourselves a disservice if we refuse to look at art that an artist made just because that artist is a person we don't agree with and they're horrible. I think that we should exercise nuance. I think that we would enrich our lives if we did so more often. If we were to think about these things with whatever context we know, and realize that sometimes the context doesn't matter for this one piece. We're seeing it as it is. Perception is reality, right? So if I can look at this one piece of work for what it is and enjoy it for what it is, even if the artist had something different intended, and let's say it was something subversive and ugly and we don't agree with it, but if my perception of that expression is different, that becomes my reality. People do it all the time. Why can't they do it when it comes to art and artwork? Especially in the cases where the artwork is meant to be enriching and positive and beautiful in whatever way, and the individual that created it isn't that way. I just still don't get it. The artwork it is a separate thing, even when it comes from the person. I just believe the product is a separate thing in and of itself. It is of itself. The artist can give it context. What we know about the artist can give it context, but I mean, if we know nothing about them, we still have an interpretation of it. If we know everything about them, we have an interpretation of it. We can choose to ignore things. We can choose to add things to the work that shouldn't be added. That's in everyone's right, and we do it to some degree all the time. I just think that it's. Yeah, I don't. It's really difficult for me to explain it anymore as to why I think it's a waste of opportunity when people do it. I don't understand why people do it. Is the biggest thing. Not wanting to support someone financially, I understand that. Wanting to ignore maybe the importance or beauty in any context, aesthetic or conceptual beauty of a work that could possibly be life-changing to you, or could just, again, enrich your life somehow, because you won't even give it the opportunity to do it so because the person who created it is someone that you find repulsive. It would be, I don't know I can't even compare it to anything right now. I was going to say something like it would be like about, I don't even know. I'm going off the rails here. I suppose I have this one last piece to say in conclusion. The diction is executed very purposefully, so read it or listen to it with intent and deconstruct it, because I'm not going to give it a caveat after. When we refuse to separate art from the artist, we do ourselves a disservice by subtracting the opportunity to interpret the work meaningfully. It's really weird to move on from that. For some reason, that discussion got really heavy for me. I don't know why, because I don't think it did last time, and I was way more aggressive about it last time. But something about my mood right now, I don't know, it's hard to like move on from that. But I'm going to move on to something way different in the epilogue today, because something that somebody asked me, again, over the Instagram. You can go to ArtistLife Podcast. You can search that up on Instagram and find that every week. And you don't have to wait for me to do this, but every week I just put out at least once just on the story kind of component there, just a call for questions. And someone had asked me, what two famous artists from history would I like to be compared to and why? And I kind of have an answer and kind of have a non-answer that's an answer. And that is that, what do I go with first? I'll go with the kind of answer first and then the non-answer. I can only think of one person, and I didn't spend a lot of time on it. But I would say David Cho, and I've mentioned before that he is my favorite artist. So I can't think of two people, just right off the bat. David Cho came to my head. I'm sure I could struggle to find someone else that I would want to be compared to. Pollock rings a bell too. So maybe I'll just talk about those two real quick before I give my non-answer that is, in my opinion, a more real answer than this answer. So, starting with Pollock first, I guess I'd like to be compared to him because I really believe in his philosophy of art and the process of making art being the real art, and that what is left over is just evidence of art. Something I've talked about a couple times before, but is that a finished piece is not the actual work of art. It was the process in making it that was the work of art. I'm not going to get into the details of that right now, but I have talked about it before, and Clement Greenberg wrote on that as well, and other critics have wrote about Pollock's philosophy, and I definitely was influenced by that because I don't like his finished work that much. The aesthetics of it don't do a lot for me, but the philosophy of his art making really did. So I guess if I was to compare myself or want to be compared to someone, it would be that I really found the art making process to be the work of art in itself. And I've tried to show evidence of the art making process as its own work of art and kind of jump off of those ideas. The other person was David Cho. He's my favorite artist. His prolific output in a diverse amount of areas. He is just what he's able to do, what he does do. There's a lot of reasons I love David Cho, and part of it is because he has so much money he doesn't have to really care about this or that. He is very free. His money allows him to be very free, and I feel like he uses that liberty in a way that I do envy, I guess. I don't think that I can compare to him right now. But I just really feel like if the artist that I want to be in a way is kind of what the question reminds me of too. And it'd be I would love to be compared to David Cho if I could ever reach the level of not necessarily fame or finances, but my level of output to be very diverse and so prolific and just being able to do what I want to do without being restricted. If I was able to attain that type of, I don't know any other way to do that without having the finances backing it, right? But that is something that I definitely aspire to. So those are the two real answers, and in some ways this non-answer is a more real answer to me, and that is some ways a very typical answer from artists, especially when musicians get asked, and this is an interview question that I've seen a lot. I don't know if it was in Revolver or Metal Hammer, but there's a certain type of interview that they do, and they ask, one of the questions is, what is the album that you wish you made yourself? It's usually, I think it was the top 10 albums that changed my life, and I think that's in Revolver and Metal Hammer. maybe just Metal Hammer. I don't remember. Anyway, and a lot of the time, the answer is it's kind of a cop-out, but I really feel strongly with it too. It's like, well, the album that I wish I would have made is the one that I haven't made yet. or someone says that, like, yeah, I don't wish I made anyone's album, that's their stuff. And that's kind of how I feel too, is like, I don't want to be compared to anybody, because ultimately I'd be incomparable. Ultimately, the dream would be that I am so either prolific, or whatever concepts that I've had were just so, like, I can't even think of a word right now, that they changed things so much, that I was such a unique, individual, that I could not be compared. I don't think I am that. Like, I mean, there's a part of me that believes it, like that really, like, egotistical, like, elitist, like, part for sure believes that I am that, and I just haven't been able to execute it, or express it, or it be discovered yet, or however you want to put it. I do, and I mean, there's many reasons I do believe this, and I want to believe this, that we're all completely unique individuals and have the opportunities to be so different from other people, etc. And there's, I think, obvious reasons why I want to believe that, rather than being, depressed all the time, feeling like I don't matter, or that I'll never matter, or things like that. So I guess, yeah, the answer that is a non-answer, but is yet more real to how I feel about the question, is that I don't want to be compared to anybody. I would hope that I can't be compared to anyone, because what I've done in my artistic practice, or whatever, that I somehow revolutionized something, or that I just created a style so unique to me, or lived my life in a way so unique to me that it couldn't be compared to other artists, that things, that I've done or said, or whatever concepts I've laid down, were just something I did was so significant that they refer to me when they compare other people to me, rather than compare me to other people. That's my answer to that. That's going to be the end of this episode. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about next week. I have ideas, but I'm not 100% sure. They could always change depending on how my week goes. I usually record these on Sunday and put them out on Tuesday. That doesn't matter. Why am I telling you that? But I guess it's because there's time until next week for someone to change my mind and maybe give me a question that will spark a new episode idea. I've got a couple in the bank in my mind as to what I want to express and what I want to talk about. But I always want to wait until it's very timely too. Like, I have something back there, but if I'm not really in the mood for it, I don't want to express it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on especially separating art from the artist. And well, yeah, those are my thoughts, and that is my artist life.